Good morning and good afternoon to everyone on the webinar today. As an advanced managed services provider, Arctic IT, along with our partner, Barracuda Networks, is proud to share the latest information on your most vulnerable asset, your inbox. With me on the webinar today is our Client Services Manager, Andre Gonzalez, and Barracuda Networks System Engineer, Gabe McHugh. Now I'd like to turn over the presentation to Andre Gonzalez from Arctic IT.
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you to everyone that's joined in on the call. At Arctic IT, we're always excited to bring you the very latest and greatest in technology. And today, in conjunction with Barracuda Networks, we'd like to teach everyone what we consider the best way to strengthen your defensive line so that you can block and tackle email threats. In today's presentation and manner of agenda, we'll tell you a little bit about us. We'll ask you to answer a quick poll question. And then Barracuda's Gabe McHugh will speak to the email threat landscape, a multi-layered protection approach, and demonstrate the product that we're recommending. We'll then talk next steps and take questions if you've got any. So a little bit about us. Arctic IT is an experienced solution provider, and we think that our strengths are in our stability as an organization, in being able to execute our client's vision, and being a strong teammate, being somebody that you can count on to work well with you. A little bit more is that we're a security-minded technology company. We've been growing over 16 years, and as part of the Doyon family of companies, we're 8A certified. Although we're nationwide with employees in over 20 states, our home and headquarters is still right here in Anchorage, Alaska. We're very proud that we're a Microsoft Gold partner. We let folks know that only 1% of Microsoft technology providers have attained this certification. And what that really means is that we've become excellent within the Microsoft stack and have staff that knows those products in and out. We mainly do business in two lanes, which is our Arctic Care managed services. That's your IT services with network support, help desk support. And Arctic Ascend, our application services, where we help folks with the softwares that run their day-to-day business, mainly in the Microsoft stack. And as I mentioned, Arctic Care Managed Services, that's mainly what we'll be focusing in on today. We do have a few different solutions here within Arctic Care. These three options are available to our clients: Arctic Care Essentials, Arctic Care Advanced, and Arctic Care Secure. The difference between these is how much security is layered in. Arctic Care Essentials gives you heightened security, Arctic Care Advanced gives you premier security, and Arctic Care Secure is actually for folks who might already have an IT department in their organization. This adds enhanced security to those organizations with their own IT team. A little bit more about these Arctic Care plans, as I'd mentioned, there's managing your IT systems network. There's training and support desk and security testing and security system health evaluations that are involved with Arctic Care Essentials as well as Advanced. These allow us to do things like phish threat testing to test folks on phish threats, as well as provide reports that will help you find the vulnerabilities to your security standpoint. With Arctic Care Advanced, we layer in quite a number of software solutions that will help with advanced monitoring, auditable device encryption, ransomware instant defense, dark web monitoring, and used hardware disposal, as we know that security doesn't end at the trash can. With Arctic Care Secure, as I'd mentioned, we strip out the help desk component and all of the security items are layered in to help your current IT team. That's why we've invited our security partner Barracuda to speak to you today. They have a great email protection software that we think would be great for everyone to learn more about. They also offer network and app security as well as data protection. And teammates matter quite a deal to us, and we also want to be great teammates for you. So that is why we've invited Gabe McHugh to speak to you this morning. Before we turn it over to him, we wanted to take a quick pulse, and I'm going to hand it over to Joanne so we can ask you folks a question and you'll be able to interact with us.
Thank you, Andre. Okay, how confident are you in your email security product or products? Very confident, somewhat confident, not confident. I do not use any email security products. We've got polls coming in now. Okay. And here are the results. 20% very confident, 60% somewhat confident, 20% not confident.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to learn a bit more about these types of email threats as Gabriel Mehug from Barracuda presents some more information to us.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Andre. So for you guys on the line, my name is Gabe McHugh. I'm with Barracuda. I've been a security systems engineer with them for about 5 years now. And I cover Barracuda's email protection portfolio, our next generation firewalls, our WAFs, as well as some of the other products in our product line. But what I actually spend the most time with on a day-to-day basis is email protection these days, just because it is the primary threat vector that we see. And it's something that people have to deal with more and more on a daily basis. So looking at the news, you may have noticed that there are a ton of phishing scams, ransomware, CEO fraud type scams. So this is a growing problem that we are seeing more and more on a daily basis. Pretty much every business is using email. It's a business critical function. It needs to flow. And because of this, scammers and hackers are increasingly targeting it as a threat vector, just because you don't necessarily need to be that technologically savvy to get someone to wire you money that they shouldn't, or to give you their credentials. So it's a great into the network. So the biggest problem is over 74% of attacks start with email. I've seen numbers up to 90% regarding this, but it still remains the most exploited threat vector. When email first existed as a protocol, there really wasn't any security built in. You know, if you want to pretend to be Microsoft when you send an email, you can, right? There's nothing that prevents you from using Microsoft.com in a from section when you're sending an email. So email really wasn't designed as a protocol with security in mind. By default, it's not encrypted. There's really no security built in. So that's why it's remained such a problematic threat vector. You know, everyone's really letting it into their network in some extent. So we've seen increased risks over the last decade. So back in the early 2000s, things were a lot simpler. So we might have just seen spam and malware. You know, then as email kept being used more and more throughout organizations, there started to be some compliance requirements around it. People needed to save email for 7 years, 10 years. So there was sort of regulatory rules around email as it became more and more widely used. And then somewhere around the mid 2000s, we started to see zero-day attacks. So zero-day attacks were typically ransomware type attacks, crypto lockers. And because these were so profitable, because people were able to get paid in Bitcoin, it became profitable for hackers to really change the malware up on a daily basis. So malware would bypass signature-based systems. So we started to see a lot more ransomware, and we still see a decent amount of this, even though sandboxing has done a good job at blocking that. And then now that most organizations are doing some sort of sandboxing for email attachments, the newest threat is phishing. So we see display name impersonations. We see links impersonating different brands like Office 365 or FedEx, or impersonating the CEO. So this is the new cutting edge type of attacks that people are falling for. And continued, right? Ransomware, spear phishing, social engineering, business email compromise, and account takeover. So in the early days, it was simple, right? You had a mail server, you know, employees got their mail. And to block the spam and malware, people began putting simple spam firewalls in front of it. And this did a pretty good job. There's different rules. There's IP reputation lists. There was rules that, you know, looked at the content of the mail, looking for malicious keywords like, you know, Viagra or things like that. And that seemed to block most of the egregious spam. Then we started adding some additional layers of security. So for example, zero-day threats became prominent, so sandboxing was added to most email security systems. So sandboxing actually spins up the attachment in real time, looks at its behavior, and then based on how that file behaves, it's able to block that in real time. And then, as email is more widely used, data loss prevention layers were added to ensure compliance with things like HIPAA to make sure patient data was encrypted if it was being sent via email, and then archiving was needed for email compliance. But nowadays, social engineering seems to bypass the vast majority of most filters. The reason for that being is social engineering is really designed to get around filters. There's no links, there's no attachments. It's just someone saying something innocuous like, hey, are you at your desk, or can you buy some iTunes gift cards? The other thing that we're seeing is users are being compromised through their personal email. So, an employee will have a Gmail account and they'll actually get a message from Gmail saying, hey, your Office 365 account has expired, or hey, here's a multi-factor from Office 365. And now through their Gmail account, they're getting a bad link that is having them log into a fake Office 365 account, or a fake Wells Fargo account, or a fake Dropbox or SharePoint, and then give their credentials that way. So there's a new backdoor. And once those account credentials are compromised, once a user's given up their credentials in one of those fake Office 365 portals or fake SharePoint portals, typically those credentials are sold on the dark web. And with that, people will buy those, they'll go in, and then once they're inside the end user's inbox, then they can really launch an attack where they'll either try to compromise more accounts by sending out a bad link internally, or then they'll watch and they'll wait until someone goes on vacation, and then that's when they're going to make their direct deposit request change or their wire transfer change. And that's how some of these extremely large wire transfer schemes take place is, hey, someone gives up their credentials, the hacker actually sits and waits until someone's on PTO, they understand what's normal, what's expected, and then that's when they make the account number change or the wire transfer change. So those are some of the newest threats. So securing the gateway is necessary. You still need to block spam, you still need to block malware, you still need to sandbox, but it isn't really sufficient against the type of threats that we're seeing today. This phishing, spear phishing, whaling threats that we seem to see on a pretty daily basis. So Barracuda recommends a multi-layered email protection strategy. So at the bottom, you have your mail server, Office 365, G Suite Exchange, and then there's gateway defense. And there's a ton of vendors that offer gateway defense. Microsoft does it to an extent, Barracuda does it, but this does your standard malware virus filtering. It'll often do sandboxing in many places. And with those gateway solutions, there typically is an archiving offer or an encryption offer and some options to spool your email in case your mail server goes down. Some of the next level or next generation types of email defense are inbox defense. So these are solutions that tie into Office 365 or Gmail or Exchange through an API, and they're able to see messages, they're able to understand patterns. Barracuda's product in this space is called Barracuda Sentinel. So it ties directly into the Office 365 API and is able to see who communicates with who, what's normal. It's able to block those phishing attacks that have just text, no link, no attachments, that are more dangerous and seem to get through traditional layers. And then finally, there's phishing simulation and training. So your end users are your last layer of defense. And so it's always good to have some level of training and testing so users know what to look for in terms of URLs, in terms of senders, in terms of things to look out for as far as security is concerned. And then finally, there's forensics and incident response. And this is more of a new market category. But in this instance, it's about understanding how attacks come through. Just because 75% of attacks do initiate with email, it's always nice to know if something does get through, how that occurred. And then incident response, hey, if a bad email does get through and you do have 100 employees that all get this phishing email, how do you delete that email? How do you remove that email as quickly as possible so users don't click on that? So we provide and we recommend a multi-layer approach. So with forensics, typically you're able to identify malicious email. So this could either be reported through employees or identified through some level of insights that shows where the emails are coming from, what country, if they're suspicious or not. Then you can find them quickly. So a tool that lets you find the emails quickly by subject or sender, see who's clicked on any links. And then finally is to respond, right? To delete those emails from the tenant, prevent those. And now I'm going to show you a little bit about what Barracuda does as far as our email solutions. So one thing Barracuda offers is an email threat scanner. And Arctic IT will be providing you with a link where you can run the scan. But this scan actually ties into Office 365 through an API. And it's really an AI engine that backtests this AI engine on a year's worth of historical data. So you're able to see how good the Barracuda phishing protection system is through tying it to your Office 365 API. So we'll look at a few examples. So this is a CEO impersonation email. So Alexi is the CEO of this fictional company, and this isn't his real email. So what they're doing right now is they're impersonating the display name. So this is a display name spoof. And anyone can send a message from any email address and put any username here. And if you can notice with this email, there is no link, there's no attachment, there's no spammy pictures or unsubscribe. So an email like this is very difficult for a traditional antivirus engine to catch, primarily because there's none of those typical characteristics that you may see. What makes it even more difficult is we're now seeing spammers and hackers starting to send these impersonation emails from trusted domains. So they'll send it from outlook.com or gmail.com or SendGrid or other high reputation domains. So none of this stuff is going to be caught on the domain level. None of it's going to be caught by a normal filter that's looking at the message. So this kind of relies on some level of artificial intelligence. So Barracuda looks at a year's worth of historical email. It understands who Alexi is, who he emails, what names he uses, what his signature looks like, what his real email address is, what his Gmail address is, and it's able to determine based off of 34 kind of characteristics of the email, more or less, whether or not, hey, this is actually Alexi or if he's being spoofed. The other main type of attack that this is going to catch is service impersonations. So service impersonations, instead of impersonating a CEO or a CFO, impersonate typically a trusted company or business. So the most impersonated service is actually Microsoft itself. And what they're trying to do in this instance is get people's credentials. So there'll be a fake quarantine notification, an email quota exceeded, a space exceeded, especially when users have just migrated to Office 365. They're vulnerable to these types of attacks. But what traditional filters do is traditional filters look at the links, right? And they compare the links to a blacklist, or they look at the IPs and domains and they compare that to a blacklist. And that just isn't sufficient. There's new fake landing pages popping up on a daily basis. People can register a domain and throw up a landing page with a fake login within minutes. Or often what we see is they hijack a high reputation website. So they'll be like Bob's Auto Works, for example, and Bob's Auto Works will be running on WordPress, and that will have some vulnerabilities. So the hackers will actually implant their fake landing page within that high reputation domain. And that way they're able to use the high reputation of that URL to steal credentials. So this system actually takes an advanced approach where the AI analyzes the email. It understands who it's pretending to be. Is that Microsoft? Is it Dropbox? Is it OneDrive? Is it Wells Fargo? And then instead of comparing these links to a blacklist, because we've defined who this email is pretending to be, we can then compare the sender and the link to a whitelist. So even if it is a 0-day landing page or a 0-day malicious link, it's able to be blocked within the system. So it's very useful in terms of that regard. The other thing that the threat scan will show you is your employee risk exposure. So it'll show you which employees are high risk, which employees are low risk. So it'll determine whether or not people are executives, if they send wire transfers, if they handle invoices, yes or no. So you'll be able to see the risk level of employees. You'll also be able to see which senders are impersonated the most. So these are the senders that the hackers are pretending to be. Typically, it's people high up. So like Itai, he's the CFO in this instance. Masaf, he's the CIO. So typically, these are impersonation attempts where they're pretending to be this person, asking for a wire transfer, asking for a change in direct deposit, asking for someone to buy iTunes gift cards. And you'll also see the services impersonated. So which services are being impersonated the most? So we see Microsoft in this scenario kind of tracking what we see in the world at large being the most impersonated service. But there's literally hundreds of services that are impersonated: DocuSign, UPS, Dropbox, whatever credentials are valuable, where people can either get information from or reroute packages or buy things on Amazon. All of those things are things, credentials people want. And then finally, you'll see the types of fraud and the subjects used in fraud. So employee impersonations when someone's pretending to be the CEO or CFO, service impersonations where they're pretending to be a service, and blackmails. You've probably seen these before, but it's when the email says something like, hey, I have your password, I've been watching you, please send some Bitcoin, otherwise we'll release these videos, that we see every now and then as well. So that's the threat scan. So once you've ran the scan, you get visibility into what's in your inbox, what's kind of lurking there. It's great to see this historically, but it's even better to block that in real time. And productize, that's what Barracuda Sentinel does. So Barracuda Sentinel is able to actually block these attacks as they come in real time. So you'll see, this CEO impersonation, this would be blocked or quarantined in real time. Because this ties into Microsoft through its API, you don't have to change MX records, you don't have to alter mail flow, you really just give the API access. And then when Barracuda acts on an email, it just moves it to the junk folder or deletes it from the tenant. Because we're tied directly into the API, you can use Barracuda Sentinel in conjunction with any other email protection that may be at the gateway. So if you're using Microsoft for kind of basic security or any other vendor, you can still layer on Sentinel for the phishing and spear phishing. The other thing Sentinel does is it monitors account takeover incidents. So for example, it monitors inbox rules, emails sent from the account, and suspicious sign-ins. And it does all this by looking at historical information and applying the AI to that as well. So there's some other solutions that do similar things, but the issue with that is people typically get hundreds of notifications a day. Every time someone uses a VPN or goes on vacation, they're getting alerted. The way Sentinel looks at is it looks at not just the location that the user's signing in from, but all the device information sent in that header. So, hey, they're on an iPhone 11 using the mobile app, right? So it's able to use that type of information in conjunction with the IP address to provide alerts where you might only be getting 1 or 2 alerts a week. So it's a very actionable alert. The other thing that it monitors is inbox rules. So typically the first thing a hacker does when they take access to an Office 365 account is they actually change inbox rules. They forward everything to an external Gmail, or they delete inbound messages from IT or other people that they're trying to as part of the fraud. So this actually monitors suspicious inbox rule creation as well to alert you, hey, has someone logged into this account? This type of layer is especially important to detect when people may have been compromised through a phishing email in Office 365 or OneDrive or SharePoint phishing email sent to maybe one of their personal email accounts that has them log in and then give up their work credentials. And then finally, Barracuda Sentinel provides DMARC setup and reporting. So DMARC, if you guys are not familiar with it, it's an email authentication protocol. It's very similar to SPF and DKIM, but it has some advantages. So, SPF isn't 100%. There are ways that people can still spoof using SPF. SPF only looks at the envelope from in the email header, whereas there's other from headers that people could spoof. So what DMARC does is it looks at SPF, it looks at DKIM, and it also matches headers. But the other thing that it does is it also gives you reporting in terms of how your domain is being used. So most organizations nowadays have third-party mailing services like MailChimp, Constant Contact, and those email services have to have a good SPF record associated with them or DMARC record associated with them if they're using your domain to make sure they're not blocked by the recipients. So what this DMARC does is actually provides visibility is, hey, is this passing SPF? Is this passing DKIM? Where is this failing? So it'll let you know specifically if your messages are getting through from these third-party services. And with that, I will turn it back over to Andres. I believe he has a few more slides to show us.
Thanks a lot, Gabe. That's some pretty fantastic information. And here at Arctic IT, we also use the Sentinel product. It's fantastic. It's really easy to use, and that's usually the thing that stops most folks up is on a day-to-day basis, is it going to be a pain to have to unquarantine those emails or stuff like that? It's very simple to use, and I'm glad that we're bringing this to our clients' attention. So we want to take a couple of minutes just to show you what we think are some good next steps. And so we prepared just 2 more slides here for you. The first step you should take is really to understand and acknowledge the changing email threat landscape. This means understanding that attacks are no longer in your face and easy to detect, but instead are now hiding in the shadows, and these attacks could be happening in the background without any detection. Once you're aware of these sophisticated and evolving threats, you can then determine the impact of these threats on your company, which brings us to the next step. This step is really determining the current shape of your company. Do you currently have solutions in place to handle these sophisticated attacks like Gabe was pointing out just a moment ago? Do you have a backup plan if things go wrong? And if you don't, what could you risk losing? This step means understanding the impact that an attack could have on your employees' jobs, your company's bottom line, and more importantly, the company's reputation. After acknowledging the changing threat landscape and determining the impact that an attack could have on your company, the last step is deploying solutions to avoiding these attacks. By deploying the solutions in Essentials, you're ensuring that your company is secure and that your data is archived and backed up so that in case something were to happen, your company would be covered. From that's never going to happen to me to it very well could happen, but we need to be prepared when it does. Consider getting an email threat scan using the 3 tool that we just pointed out to you. As Gabe was mentioning, there's clearly the product, which is the Barracuda Sentinel, but there's a free tool that we'll give you access to here. And I'll provide you folks with some links. First, the Barracuda site itself to learn more about that total email protection. And then if you wanted to go to arcticit.com/scan, that is where you could find the threat scanner tool. It'll allow you to put your information into there. And as long as you're using Office 365, and also if you've got the global administrator credentials, you'll be able to run the threat scan. Certainly that's something that we can have a conversation about, but we'll have a frank discussion about your actions after you run that threat scanner tool. And that could include trialing the Barracuda's email protection tools. So of course, we will hang out here at the webinar for a few more minutes to answer any questions that you folks might have. But the real action item here is to reach out to one of us and see where it is that this type of protection can fit into your organization. It's not a straightforward or easy conversation, so we would love to partner with you folks so that we can use our expertise to help guide this conversation. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that might be lingering out there.
Thank you, Andre and Gabe. That was a great presentation. There are a couple questions that came in. The first question is, how does this differ from a Microsoft ATP?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that question. So Microsoft ATP actually does a couple different things. So
And for those who don't know, that's that advanced threat protection.
Yep, definitely. So Microsoft ATP, what that does is really two things. One is it does attachment sandboxing. So as files come in, they're spun up in a secure sandbox, and then based on the behavior of those files, they're either let into the system or blocked. It's an anti-ransomware type prevention mechanism. So Barracuda has something similar to that portion on its Barracuda Essentials platform is attachment sandboxing. The other thing Microsoft ATP does is it does provide some level of phishing impersonation protection, but it's limited to roughly 15 users or so, and you have to create all the rules manually. On the flip side of that, the Barracuda Sentinel, all the rules are built automatically and therefore every single user. And that's what the AI does, is it automatically builds all those rules for every single user, versus Microsoft ATP's anti-phishing is a rule-based manual setup that you're limited to around 15 employees or so. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. The other question, which you may have touched on this, how does this tie into Office 365?
Yeah, definitely. So any of Barracuda's solutions can work with Office 365. So we're a huge Microsoft partner. And Sentinel itself ties directly into Office 365 through an API. Barracuda's other email protection solutions, Essentials and Fishline, can work with any email platform. And we offer things like Azure AD integration for those as well.
Great. And there is another one. How do you detect an account takeover?
Yeah, so there's really three mechanisms that we use to detect account takeovers: suspicious sign-in attempts, inbox rule changes, and emails sent from the account itself. So those are the three things that we're monitoring for suspicious activity to determine whether or not an account has been taken over. And based on those three mechanisms, we alert the administrator when we believe that has happened based on those three metrics.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll give a few seconds, but I don't think there's any more in the queue coming in.
And this is Andre again. I'm going to roll this back one more slide. I'll remind everyone, go to that arctic-it.com/scan. That's where you'll be able to run that threat scanner. It'll let you know what's currently sitting there in your inboxes for your organization, what threats are currently already out there. As an ongoing protection method, we could certainly work with you to get you on an Essentials trial or even get moving forward into Sentinel. But the big takeaway here should be let's try getting that scan done and then have a frank conversation about what's in there and what threats you might be dealing with.
Great. Well, with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. And if you get a chance and you want to look back at the recording, if you go to our website, arctic-it.com, you will find all the past recordings there. So thank you so much for joining us.
Have a great day, folks.